We're fixing to see something here pertaining to the Texas school shooting of a bunch of officers that, as far as I'm concerned, somebody needs to be charged with some sort of negligent homicide. And I don't think that's ever happened but one or two times. I forgot now where it was, whenever some officers got charged at. But whenever you wait 77 minutes before you engage the enemy, in the meantime, the evidence proves that they did have the right type of firearm. They was backed up with officers, but it still took this long to take this individual down. Not only should people lose their jobs, but somebody should be charged for some sort of wrongful death suit of some sort. In other words, a wrongful death suit should go after the county officers that was in place that day towards responding, because this is just totally unacceptable to wait 77 minutes before you end the shooter. Please listen. This is horrible. Another horrible scene.
Happening right now is day 2 of a Texas Senate Special Committee hearing being held in response to the Uvalde school massacre that left 19 children and 2 teachers dead. Today, the focus is on mental health and firearms safety. You can see that hearing now underway as we speak. On Tuesday, we learned new details about what happened that horrific day and heard strong condemnation of the police response to the shooting. The head of the Texas Department of Public Safety described it as a, quote, abject failure. NBC News correspondent.
Now, what's the difference between a failure and an abject failure? Failure to me is failure. I just put in one of my deals yesterday. What's the difference between naked and buck naked? Naked is naked. Well, come to find out, they got the word buck from an animal of a buck deer, and that's where the word buck naked come from. But still, a deer, they got wool, they got hair, so they're not naked. I don't know where the terminology come from toward being buck naked, that there's a difference between naked and buck naked. Well, is there a difference really between a response of a group of police officers towards it just being a total failure versus an abject failure? You do the math.
Brock is live from Austin with the latest on it. Sam, what more, if anything, have we learned new today from that committee?
So nothing so far, Peter, that is material to the investigation. There are 9 scheduled speakers today. The first 7 have to do with mental health. The last 2 have to do with firearm safety. And this, Peter, right now, as the police response to this massacre remains squarely under the microscope. Using posters, timelines, and maps.
Hey, you stop the killing, you stop the dying.
The head of the Texas...
You stop the killing, you stop the dying. What kind of philosophy is that? First of all, everybody's going to die. We're all going to die of either natural causes or unnatural causes. Killing is totally different than murdering. I don't know where he come up with that. There's a difference in running over somebody accidentally on a bicycle and you murdered that human being versus deliberately killing people that you didn't have any intentions other than wanting to kill people, or wanting to bring harm and hurt and harm into people's lives. You're basically, at that point in time, you're a monster. You're a cold-blooded, vicious murderer or killer, or whatever terminology that you want to use.
Public safety called the police response in Uvalde an abject failure.
The only thing stopping a hallway of dedicated officers from entering room 111 and 112 was the on-scene commander, who decided to place the lives of officers before the lives of children.
The man Director McCraw is singling out Pete Arredondo.
Decided to put the lives of officers in front of the lives of children. You know, those officers that was there that day that could have stopped that, and that guy right there, there's probably already death threats coming on them people's lives by cousins, aunts, nephews, nieces, good friends of those family members pertaining to those children. And to be quite honest with you, I wouldn't want to be in that guy's shoes, or some of the officers that was there that morning that now is going to have to live with this the rest of their lives, towards knowing that if they would have went ahead and pursued into that class, into that school like they should have had, they could have possibly saved 8, 10, 12, maybe even up to 13, 14, 15 lives if they'd have went ahead and engaged. But instead, they hung around out there for 77 minutes.
Pete Arredondo, the school district police chief,
Talk about a dereliction of duty.
previously told the Texas Tribune he never considered himself the incident commander. On Tuesday,
Never considered himself. Where does the buck stop? The buck has to stop with somebody in that county that calls these type of shots. For surely to God, somebody was smart enough, intelligent enough to already put somebody in charge if the worst case scenario was to have occurred. You don't like to think that these things could occur, but you know what? In today's society, I think you would be a fool if you didn't properly train your officers in regards towards a school incident just like this or something similar. If you didn't already pre-plan and train your officers in case of an emergency like this, and who was actually going to be the one in charge, to me that's gross negligence, and that ain't acceptable.
he declined to answer questions. Climbing into an elevator.
McCraw said that you were wrong in the moment.
After 5 hours of closed-door testimony before the Texas House. But during an open Senate session, fresh evidence from inside Robb Elementary's hallways, cultivated from surveillance footage like these images obtained by the Texas Tribune and Austin Statesman, body camera video and audio recordings, appears to contradict concerns about lack of firepower, armor, or locked doors.
There you go.
According to the testimony, at 11:33, the gunman begins shooting into the classrooms. By 11:35, 3 Uvalde police officers enter with 2 rifles, followed by Arredondo and 3 other officers. The chief calling for backup 5 minutes later. I need some more firepower in here because we all have pistols and this guy's got a rifle. At 11:52, the first ballistic shield arrives with 2 more about 11 minutes later.
It could have been used immediately.
Investigators also determined none of the police radios worked inside the school hallways, only those belonging to Border Patrol. And the classroom doors were unlocked per state investigators, even as Arredondo spent roughly 40 minutes trying to locate a master key.
So the teacher could not even lock the classroom door from the inside?
That's correct. There's no way to lock the door from the inside.
Parents demanding answers about the police response.
Vests, helmets, anything you could think of, they had it.
Local leaders pointing out there were more than a half dozen agencies responding, not just Uvalde police.
Like it's the perfect storm of what not to do happened in Uvalde, Texas.
The perfect storm towards not what to do. You know, I started promoting the ideal years ago of the first school shooting, that what they needed to do, they needed to put automatic lock, magnetic, digital locking mechanisms on all the school doors, to where if an incident like that was to occur, there would be a master button somewhere in the principal's office, to where whenever he mashed that button, it would immediately lock down everything in that facility. That way it would at least isolate the incident. If they had something like that day, because the way I understand it, this individual went from classroom to classroom. He had 77 minutes while these people was in there being terrorized and mutilated, massacred. If somebody would have had a device like I'm talking about, and I think they got them in most jail facilities, most prisons, to where they can do an automatic lockdown, to where everything will lock down all at once, it probably don't cost maybe $150 per door to have something like that put in. Let's say you got 80 doors. Okay, do the math on what it would cost to do 80 or 80 times 100. You know, you're basically looking at that amount of money. But what is the price of a child's life worth? Much less the lives of a great deal of children's lives worth. Because that individual that just done that, he could have just very well have shot somebody that was going to grow up and become a doctor and maybe discover the cure of AIDS, or that individual that shot and killed somebody, one of them children could have grown up and become a president of the United States. You don't never know what's going to happen in people's lives as they grow and as they become adults. There is not an amount of money that can replace an individual's life, especially an innocent child's life. So even if it did cost $100, $150 per door to put electrical, digital, magnetic lock systems in to where the principal could isolate the incident by hitting one button and causing all of them to lock down at once, it would be worth it if it saved only one life, much less 19. Our safety judicial system tactics are primitive, and they're still based upon the day of the Andy Griffin ain't be era. If we do not upgrade towards tactics engaging in these type of onslaughts that now has become obvious. I mean, I think they have a massive shooting in America now. Every 16 hours, there's 4 more people that gets killed because of some idiot with a gun decides they want to go on a rampage. If we do not evolve with the signs of times that is upon us, just like Congress doing something with the gun reform deal towards the age of 21, or as far as I'm concerned, those type of army style guns should not be allowed in the eyes of the public. But that's neither here nor there. I'm not an expert on none of that, and I'm not going to weigh in on that because I'm not a politician on that. But I do think that this has been way out of hand for years now, and to think that our safety concerns are this lax to the point that we're sitting idly by, and that's basically what it amounts to, sitting idly by and not upgrading and updating our safety tactics towards how we can prevent in saving people's lives, not necessarily if this occurs, but we need to start looking at this when it occurs. When this occurs in your local community, in your local school, with your children or your grandchildren or your great-grandchildren in there, are you going to be satisfied that every precautionable move had been taken by the very people that you're allowing your taxpayers to pay for? Are you going to be satisfied that your child or your grandchild or your great-grandchild, that there was no way of preventing this from happening? I wouldn't be if I had children in that school. Like I said a while ago, the people that was engaged in that, they need to hide. They need to protect their identity. They probably need to move from that area, whoever it was. The main guy, he needs to be arrested for negligent homicide or dereliction of duty or something. I mean, there has to be a line drawn in the sand with the citizens of the American people to where enough is enough towards holding these people accountable that are not doing their jobs. Just like 9/11, whenever 9/11 happened, I don't think nobody actually got penalized or punished. If anything, they probably got promotions towards not doing their jobs. Whenever they had the hearings in Texas pertaining to the Waco incident, with the ATF that started that 9-month pursuit in a group of people that was basically a bunch of doomsday preppers. Whenever they had the hearings on that, the very people that was engaged in that and the very people that made the radical mistakes that day, and there was many of them that was made, instead of them being punished by getting fired or getting charges put on their lives, they actually got promoted and went to higher paying positions. Is there something wrong with that picture? In other words, we're going to pay you to allow for our children to be harmed and killed after we're paying you to protect our children? Wow. And they want to put me in the category of me being a lunatic or me being a monster? Huh. Wow.
Peter, when the DPS director was asked why these classroom doors only lock from the outside, his direct response was, "I can't explain it. It makes no sense." He also said it prevents the school itself from actually being able to practice a real lockdown. And it's also notable, teachers from one of those classrooms, additionally to that, also reported that the lock wasn't working. It was inspected. It wasn't the lock per se, but the strike plate that wasn't going all the way through. So even if they had tried to lock the door, it still would not have been secure. Peter?
If I was one of them teachers, if I was a teacher right now, going back to school whenever school opens, if I could not lock that door, I'd go to Homestead or Home Depot or somewhere, and I'd get me a cheap, conventional lock that's got a two-way thing on it. It's got a swivel, plus it's got the other thing. And if I had to, I'd pay for it out of my own pocket, which would probably be $10 or $12, something like that. And I'd have somebody screw it in for me, or I myself would take a drill and drill holes and put it in that door. I would make sure that if I was a school teacher, that I was responsible for those lives that was in that room, that I would be able to lock that door at my own judgment if I deemed it necessary for that door to be locked, even if I had to go buy a lock myself. And you know, that's the thing about the teachers here in America, that our teaching system has really went way down, to the point that a lot of these teachers go way out of their way towards providing for their children, making sure that they have adequate supplies, making sure that they're taken care of the way that they should be, because a lot of these schools are so underfunded that it's not even funny. Just like this deal right here. I mean, if they would have had, if the principal would have had monitoring systems set up, probably, I don't know, 30 cameras. You can have like 2 monitors that has like 15 pictures on each monitor. You may have to have more monitors than that. But he ought to be able to see in all the classrooms at all the time, in all the hallways and everything outside at any given time. And you may have to actually pay a security guard to do this, to where that's all he does is sit and watch those things, and maybe he does something else on the side. Maybe he's answering phone calls or whatever. But you're going to have to monitor this situation almost as crucial, or as you would if it was a prison. Because at any given time in a prison, stuff can happen. Now granted, whenever I was going through the system towards being studied, some of those jails that I was in had an inboard intercom, to where whenever they lock you up at night in there with a pod of 1 person or 2 or 4 or whatever, if there was a disturbance in there because of whatever reason, you could always press the button. But most of the time, you had to take somebody's shirt off that ordinarily is orange, and either hang it on the bars or put it out the window where they bring in the tray, or wave it up and down in the hallway to make sure that maybe somebody was looking at the camera that could identify that there was a problem in that pod. I'm going to say 90% of your jails does not have safety features that would protect the innocent inmates involved in an incident that happens in that pod, 90% of the jails, county, state, and federal, does not have adequate safety features. That way, if something was to break out, they could be notified immediately. Just like the schools. They don't have proper safety features. They don't have proper safety training tactics. And we call ourselves concerned about our citizens until it happens to one of our grandchildren or one of our children. It's got to stop. This insanity has to stop towards attacking the Christians, people like myself, because we so much as step on a wooden nickel and hurt somebody's feelings. But yet now seeing all these events that's costing people's lives, ruining people's lives, this has got to stop. If not, the citizens of this great nation is going to have to basically go in and overthrow the people that's already in there, because they're not doing an adequate job. And that begins at the local end, goes all the way up to the upper end. If we don't have people in place, because safety should be always the number one priority, no matter if you're flying an airplane, you're taking somebody down the road in a taxi, you're a teacher, or you're working in a prison institution and you're taking care of a bunch of inmates. Safety should always be the number one priority, above and beyond any other issue. Any other issue. Just like whenever people go swimming in a public swimming pool, ordinarily there's a lifeguard on duty. Why is that? Safety. In case somebody bumps their head, or in case somebody goes under and don't come back up. Our political system has failed the American people so badly in the past 30 plus years. I don't know that it would be any dangerouser in somebody living in America right now than it would be if they was in an Amazon forest somewhere with lions and tigers and poisonous snakes and all kinds of other critters that's crawling around that could kill you. That's how bad it is. That's how bad it is in America per se. In some places a little worse than others, especially in your major metropolitan areas, in your bigger cities. But it has got to the point that I would compare our safety features today similar towards going through the Amazon forest, or maybe some forest over in Africa, not knowing if a lion or a tiger was going to eat you alive, or you was up in, let's say, northern Alaska, and a big black bear that weighs 400 or 500 pounds, 7 foot tall, could eat you alive. That's how bad it is. And I know whenever somebody hears this, they're going to say, wow, he's really degrading our law enforcement pertaining to our judicial system here in America, isn't he? Well, you know what? If the freaking truth fits, if the shoe fits, wear it, is what my grandmother used to always say. And I don't remember things being this out of order whenever I was growing up in the 60s, 70s, and even throughout the 80s was halfway decent. I mean, there was a few Fruit Loops out there that was putting razor blades and apples and poisoning children during trick or treat. There was a few incidences where people took aspirin and put cyanide pills in it and wanted to kill people. There was a few incidences where some mass murder went on the loose and killed a bunch of people, like happened up in Chicago during the early 1900s during the World Fair. There was a few incidences like Jim Jones that wanted to lead a group of people in drinking a bunch of poisonous Kool-Aid that killed, I think, 1,200 people or something like that, 800 or something like that. It was a large amount of people. There's always going to be a few Fruit Loops out there, regardless whether it's somebody like David Koresh or Timothy McVeigh that our society has to be out on lookout for. But today, you can times that times probably 1,000 or more. That now, instead of it putting them in the category of 1 out of 1,000, now put it in the category of let's say out of 1,000, 100 out of 1,000 is going to wind up doing something crazy. The statistics has risen that high to the point of whenever I was growing up, you could figure on about probably 2 out of 1,000, maybe 3 out of 1,000 that was going to do something radical. Today, out of 1,000 people, there's going to be probably 100 of them that's going to do something totally bizarre to the point that they're either going to harm and hurt their own lives or they're going to harm and hurt somebody else's. That is how high the safety concern level has risen pertaining to the violent acts that's being subjected to the general public today in comparison to what it was 40, 50 years ago. So because of it, we should evolve. Our technique should evolve. We should have more cameras. We should have more people that's trained towards not if it's going to happen, but when it happens. That's the concept that they're failing in today pertaining to law enforcement and our judicial system. It's not if it's going to happen, but when it happens, how can we limit the collateral damage, the carnage? They're still doing things like they was doing back in the Andy Griffin day, Barney day, B day. Sad.
So many awful lessons to be learned from that experience there. Sam Brock watching it all from Texas for us today. Sam, thank you. And just hours after the bipartisan group of senators released the text of their new gun legislation, 14 Republicans voted to move ahead with the debate, putting it closer to passage. So will they all stay on board for the final bill? And how soon could it get that vote? We're going to check on all of it. Plus, I'm going to speak to one of the Democratic senators involved in those negotiations. That's next, live on MSNBC.
So at least that's a move forward in the right direction towards progression. You know, I don't know.
In the next few days that will sign on in support of this. The big question now is when we can expect a vote. So right now we're expecting this to either happen tomorrow or Friday before the senators leave on a 2-week 4th of July recess that will then kick it off to the House. Speaker Nancy Pelosi has said that she's eagerly awaiting that to happen. She said she's ready to have a vote as soon as possible on this. It is likely to pass in the House as well. Senator Chris Coons actually said
should have done happen. This vote, this reform, should have happened 20 years ago whenever the Sandy Hook murder happened. Or even going back to the Virginia or West Virginia university, the college where a bunch of school kids got killed. This should have been done years ago, but yet nobody's holding these people accountable towards giving them their walking papers. That's the part that I don't understand, because in some of these other countries, they demand for these people to hold their positions and their sworn duties to the fullest extent, and if they don't, ordinarily these people lose their jobs at the very least, and in some countries they may even lose their lives. I've seen some of these people rise up in some of these other countries that failed the people, and they basically made an example out of those people that they had hired and put in place to be able to handle these positions. America don't do that. And why they don't do that is beyond me. You know, it's like they can dish it out, but they can't take it. Why don't we hold our police force more accountable? Why don't we hold people that's in these high-ranking positions more accountable? That's what I want to know. Is it because we've been taught that we're just supposed to take it on the cheek and let it go, regardless whether it was my child, your child, or your grandchild, or your great-grandchild? And it's not just the deal with the children. It's all of it. It's out of control. I'm really surprised that the judgment of God hadn't already fell upon to America to the degree of what we're seeing right now towards inadequate rains and places where it rains too much, or droughts, or hurricanes, or tornadoes, or all the above, towards diseases and famines and etc. I'm really surprised that this hadn't already done. I mean, we obviously we're dealing with a very, very patient, graceful God. Because if this would have been in other cultures throughout history, the way that I read history, those people that acted such ways, they regretted it. They regretted it because something befalled up into their lives or up into their community, regardless whether it was a volcano, an earthquake, a flood, fires, disease, war, whatever. Because God basically lifts his protected hand off of that group of people that are no longer abiding by those same rules, because once that society is no longer fulfilling its obligations with God, guess what? God no longer has to fulfill his obligations with society. In other words, he'll lift that hand of protection off of that person, or off of that family, or off of that community, or off of that church, or off of that country, and basically give it over to the devil and say, all right, there you go. Do as you wish. Wow. Talk about Satan coming down in great wrath. There you go.
That he would hope to have this on President Biden's desk by, quote, the end of July. We've caught up with a few senators this morning who say that that is a realistic timeline. Senators on both sides of the aisle agreeing that that is actually possible, Peter.
All right, Ali Raffles at the Hill for us right now.
A realistical timeline. In other words, it's supposed to be acceptable with the citizens. Towards delay after delay after delay. It's supposed to be acceptable with the citizens. As soon as somebody goes on a rampage, we have a doctor, we have an attorney, we have somebody raising a red flag. Well, you can't commit capital punishment on this person. This person's father talked down to them whenever they was 3 years old. They have a mental challenge, and because of it, they should not be given the death penalty. We're going to let them off on an insanity plea. Wow. We don't punish the people that deserves to be punished, and the people that fail us that we should be punishing, we don't punish. And they want to call me crazy? They want to point their finger at me and say I'm the monster? I've never seen the United States of America this upside down. And I'm afraid that the more that it proves itself to be upside down in every area from A to Z, I'm just afraid that the wrath of God is going to befall upon to this great nation in the form of judgment, in the form of God lifting his hand and allowing for whatever to happen to us. Whatever to happen to us. Because we're no longer functioning and responding and reacting in a civilized way based upon the challenges that we have to deal with today. Good luck to all of us as we end our program. Thank you for letting me talk. Good luck. Sorry I didn't have my camera positioned right. Sometimes I got it positioned right, sometimes I don't. You'll have to forgive me for that. I'm sorry. But good luck to all of us. God bless America. God bless our troops, and God bless our endeavors in where we go in the future towards these safety issues. And as I always end my program, I want to say shalom in Hebrew, pertaining to peace be with us all. Heaven help us all. Thank you.